Another idea that was floated exactly a year ago by the Bahraini foreign minister is the idea of a regional security organization that would include everyone, i.e. Iran and Israel. Of course, that idea didn't go very far, but still, it was pretty interesting to see the Bahraini foreign minister make a pretty strong case for that one. Of course, the Gulf states are currently strengthening their conventional capabilities, but I don't think this is the real story. The real story is that the Gulf states are defining their security in broader, more holistic ways. They're discovering their economic clout can be leveraged to upgrade existing relationships to more strategic ones. This is a long way from just relying on the US umbrella being very passive security actors. There's a logic to that. The US umbrella has become, in recent years, politically toxic to the Gulf states. And there are questions about the strategic and operational wisdom and competence of the US. Everyone has seen the quagmire in Iraq and Afghanistan. People wonder whether the US system actually produces the right decisions. So the idea of reducing the US footprint and reducing that perception of dependence is very much on the minds of the Gulf leaderships. So the Gulf states are basically going around these days diversifying and deepening relations with countries that growingly count as global actors, as global power gets more diffuse. The reasoning is that the denser these interactions with those new actors, China, France, and I can go down the list. The denser they are, the more these actors will accept and share the Gulf state security objective. And this is a very simple logic of interdependence. Nothing new, but they're taking to the next step. They're actually basically they're conducting their economic and national development at the same time as they're building strategic relations with powers that sit on the UN Security Council that project power, that have nuclear status, and so on. Of course, this strategy has a flip side. Greater scrutiny of these countries. If you want to become a global player and be at the G20 and shoulder international responsibilities and so on, you're going to be under more scrutiny. But in a way, this has a positive consequence. It forces the Gulf states to behave as responsible global actors. I mean, they have now to implement, and they're willingly implementing UN Security Council resolutions on a number of issues. They have to live up to the ideals that they pretend that they abide by. So in a way, this is all about building layers of protections, while relying, of course, on the US as the last resort. There is a very sober realization that the US will remain a key element in their defense posture. But they're seeking partners that can complement rather than displace the US, and this is a key point. So, I think basically today, the very fact that the French have opened the base in Abu Dhabi, I mean, I know that some people have dismissed that, 500 Frenchmen in Abu Dhabi, how much good can it do? Well, it does a lot of good. It basically transforms the Gulf states, the Gulf security into a global public good. It allows the Gulf states to say, we're not just dependent on the US, we're not followers of US policy. There is a global consensus that we're part of, and we're actually inviting as many actors to help us in shaping the security of our region. The problem is that as the Gulf states try to internationalize Gulf security, the Iranians respond with a diametrically opposed one. They want to indigenize Gulf security. They're calling for the removal of all foreign troops from the region. In a way, that makes sense, because this is how Iran can maximize its power and influence in the region. I mean, foreign military forces limit Iran's reach in the region. The problem with the Iranian argument is that the Gulf states are still sovereign nations that are free to enter agreements with outside powers as they deem. And so far, the US talks with Iran, to my knowledge, have not breached the topic of regional security and what to do. The real question when this topic is breached, the issue of regional security, will be about the modalities of the presence of foreign troops in the region, not about whether they should be based there. And by modalities, I mean, non-aggression treaties, presence or not of nuclear weapons, transparency about levels of force, and so on. There's another actor that needs to be mentioned here. It's Iraq. In our discussions about regional security, we forget a lot about Iraq these days. Of course, it's because we have a hard time envisioning how Iraq will look like in 5-10 years. It's arguably now no longer a state threat. No one worries about a large Iraqi army invading a neighbor, but there's certainly Iraq instability that could threaten the region. There's also, very different perceptions of where Iraq is today and where it's going. Is Iraq merely an Iranian pawn that will be fundamentally inimical to Gulf's interest? Or can actually Iraq turn out to be a more neutral and positive player in the region? The problem right now is that there's very little discussion about this issue, whether in the region or actually here in Washington. Let me conclude by making a few points about the US and what it should do. I've argued that the one set of policies that the Bush administration that needs to be preserved from the Bush era is the approach to Gulf security that started in 2005, 2006. I think that the Gulf security dialogue, Paul Mill cooperation, and so on, is much more than just about arms sales, and it's also about confidence building. Confidence between the Gulf and the U.S. had suffered since 2001, especially since 2003, and we see certainly a better relationship right now, as the Admiral mentioned earlier. The U.S., however, should be careful not to formalize too much its commitment to the region's security. I personally am not a big fan of a notion of a defense umbrella, formal defense umbrella or nuclear umbrella. I think it's a strategically hazardous concept. I don't think there is demand on the Gulf side either for such a formal public commitment. I would also urge the U.S. To evaluate cautiously the merits of pushing for greater multilateral defense cooperation and so on. The U.S. is not going to make great progress at this point, but this should not be the test. The test is elsewhere, is about whether the Gulf states themselves can start thinking independently or more independently about their own security needs. It's not about forcing on them an integrated early warning system at a time where they're all but ready to do so. And finally, welcome the new entrants into Gulf security. They complement the US role in the region. This is not competition. The US actually, right now, and I think the US is approaching this very, very positively. Let me end here, and thank you.
Thank you, Emile.